Welcome to this how-to video where you'll learn how to upgrade an existing Crimson 3.0 and Crimson 3.1 database to Crimson 3.2. Crimson 3.2 has been released for a while, but up until now was only supported on our FlexEdge hardware. With Crimson's unified platform, now users are able to upgrade their existing Crimson database to Crimson 3.2 to get extra features and functionality out of their existing hardware. We encourage all users to make this move to Crimson 3.2 to enjoy better troubleshooting tools, enhanced security features, and more ways to send the data where it needs to go. There are a number of feature additions and a few changes that you should be aware of before migrating to Crimson 3.2. Let's take a few minutes to discuss what those are. Upgrading to 3.2 will give you access to a powerful new feature, the System Web Server. The System Web Server is disabled by default when upgrading from Crimson 3.1 or Crimson 3.0. So once upgraded and enabled, you'll have access to a web server on the Crimson device that will allow you to make configuration changes and troubleshoot issues. Another feature is password policies. Your IT department will have a password management policy. Crimson 3.2 now makes it easier for you to align with those policies. Radio server has also been added to Crimson 3.2, so a great way to manage users and access control is to use a radio server to offload authentication and gain the ability to have one centralized point for managing users, making revoking access to users easier than making changes on each individual Crimson device. We've upgraded what we did with OPC-UA. So OPC-UA has been a part of Crimson 3.1 for quite some time. It's a great features for sending and receiving data within an industrial application, but sometimes it's important to separate access to the data and make some data publicly available and some private that requires authentication to gain access to. Crimson 3.2 adds to our existing solution to make this simple. As mentioned earlier, we want to have more ways to send data where it needs to go, so we've added 2 new cloud connectors to make it easier than ever to connect to Aviva and Cumulocity through our cloud connectors. Anyone that's used Crimson in the past understands that OPC Works Proxy was great for Crimson and Crimson communication because it made it simple. You didn't have to recreate tags from device to device. We've just streamlined that a little bit and renamed OPC Works to C3 Link. Device personalities allows users to use one Crimson database and use it across multiple pieces of hardware. We'll walk through this process of creating a personality in the walkthrough section of this video. 6View Manager Client is another feature that's been added to Crimson 3.2. 6View Manager is a device management platform. Users can use it to check the status of remote devices and push configuration changes. And when you open up the Crimson interface, you'll see another big change. So there's a new section added, Device Configuration. And many of the features that you used to interact with in communications can now be found in the Device Configuration section. So let's take a look at what those are and where they may have moved to. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see Crimson 3.1's communications section. And so let's take a look at some of the important features and see where they may have moved in the Device Configuration section in Crimson 3.2. So for example, the networking section is now listed under the system configuration section in the device configuration, and the USB host ports has now been renamed and moved where you can see it here listed as USB devices. And then in the time server and FTP server, those can be found under the services section. And then when we're installing modules and managing them, or when we're configuring modules, we need to make sure that the base unit is configured properly. So we'll go to the base unit first and assign the right module to the right port, and then we'll interact with the module in a similar fashion as before. When we're talking about which hardware is supported in Crimson 3.2, it's really what you see on your screen. So it's the data acquisition components like the DA10, the DA30, all of the CR HMIs, as well as the Graphite HMIs, and then the graphical edge controller as well. So next, let's walk through the process of converting a database. And there's really 2 methods that we can look at. So we're going to, 1, extract a database from a live Crimson device, and then 2, we're going to open up an existing Crimson database and use the Crimson configurator to convert it from there. So to upgrade a Crimson 3.1 database, we would need Crimson 3.2 configurator to do that. So once we've downloaded Crimson 3.2 and have it open, let's go ahead and walk through the process of upgrading a file database to Crimson 3.2. So to do that, we'd go to File and then Open, and then select which database version we're looking for. We could have selected 3.0. We'll select 3.1, and then select the database, Open. When we're upgrading from a file, we get the option to change hardware. So if we were to be upgrading this to a larger piece of hardware or a different piece of hardware, we just select that here. It's not the case this time, so we're going to go ahead and click OK. Now that we've got the file open, we have not upgraded the file yet, or we have not upgraded the database yet. To do that, we'd have to click Save. Once we do that, we can see that it tells us that we need to save the changes for the upgrade to take effect. And so we'll just give it a location here, and then we'd click Save if we want to do that. I'm not going to save it today, but instead we'll show you the second method. If we wanted to pull the database from a live device, we would go to Link and Options, ensure that we are connected over USB, which is a requirement for the first time upgrade, and then click OK. And then we'd go back to Link again, and then we would simply extract the database. And so we're going to say no here because we don't want to save those changes from before. It's going to ask us, do we want to save the file that it's about to create for us? So we're going to save it first. Let's go ahead and use the same file name as before, as a previous example. It's going to ask us if we want to overwrite it. I'm just going to say yes. And we understand that the device configuration changes may have been changed. And so now we have the database pulled down to our Crimson configurator. And the first thing we want to do is to enable the web server. So we mentioned earlier that the web server is disabled by default. So we'll go up to Services and Web Server and Enable. And so what this will allow us to do is get access to that device configuration section via the web server. After we get the web server enabled, we can take a look at some of the security settings. So we can take a look at those password policies we talked about earlier. You can see you can enforce strong passwords as well as enforce passwords expirations. You can set the period at which you'd like that to happen. You can also use a radius server, and we can kind of walk through that process. So the requirements would be to enable it, obviously, and then decide what kind of access level you would like the authenticated users to have. And then you can decide if you want local or no caching, meaning that if the user was authenticated, then the device itself will cache those credentials in case the radius server is unavailable. And then set the primary and secondary radius servers. So here you can put the IP address of your server. The port is normally 1812, and then you would assign the secret key here that the admin would give you. If there's a secondary server that you're using as a backup, you would put that information here. Next, let's talk about OPC UA. If we move away from the device configuration over to communication and come down to the services section, we'll see OPC UA server. Here, there's a few parameters that you're used to, but there's a new tab here for public and private data. And so now you can have public data that is made available to anyone that is able to see the server on the network. And then you can have private data that is only available to authenticated users. And so obviously you'd have to enter a username and password here for that to work. Next, let's take a look at the 6View Manager client, which can be found in the device configuration section under Services, SVM client. 6View Manager client allows us to connect into that device management platform. We simply go from disabled to how many of our servers we have and type in the information we need to connect to our servers. So we put in an IP address, ensure that we have a device name, and make sure that the check-in period and retry delay as well as the port and connection type are all set in alignment with the server we're trying to connect to. And then the only other requirement after pushing this to the device is that the device has access to a network that is able to connect to the server, and that the server has authorized the device. And so authorization of 6View Manager clients is outside the purview of this particular video, but be on the lookout for videos in the future where we'll do just that. We'll have a how-to for 6View Manager in the near future. Now that we've got 6View Manager set up, let's take a look at device personalities. We said earlier that device personalities allows us to use a single database across multiple pieces of hardware. So let's talk about how we do that. So device personalities is simply a key value pair. And so by giving us a key value pair that we can change the value of dynamically, that we can apply across different device configuration settings. So let's see what I mean by that. So let's create a new device personality first. And so we'll create LAN IP. And then click OK. And then we can go, now that we have it enabled, we can go back to our Ethernet 1 interface or Ethernet 2 interface, now that we've added a personality into the database, now we have a new column of drop-down boxes here next to each of the settings. So if we select that, we can see it's either regular or custom. If we move to custom, we can see that it changes the next drop-down box selection for us, and now we have LAN IP, which is the personality that we entered earlier. So what this means is that now the value in the key value pair of LAN IP is what this particular port will always be equal to, and we can bring this up online and we can actually change that personality using the web interface. And so it makes it easy for you to have small variations within your application, but using a single database across multiple devices, as well as maybe even multiple applications. So next, let's talk about the cloud connectors, the two new cloud connectors. To look at those, we'll move down to communications. And we can see that we've got, first up is Aviva. It'll be disabled by default, so we'll enable that. And it works in much the same way as the other cloud connectors we have. The majority of the settings that you need are keyed in there. You would just enter here the token that you would get from Aviva, decide how often you want to send the data and how you want to send the data to the cloud, and then you would define your cloud sets, and you could have multiple cloud sets and decide how you want each of those cloud sets to send the data up to Aviva. And similarly, we have Cumulosity, works in much the same way. The requirements here would be the username and password that goes with your account. You would need to add your identification, and then again decide how the data is going to go, and then divide your tag sets and define how they're going to go up to the cloud. Once we navigate to the IP address of our Crimson device, we can see the web server that we are accustomed to seeing in the past. So we have access to the logs, we have access to the remote view, which would be the virtual HMI. We also have access to a new section here, which we enabled earlier in our Crimson 3.2 configurator, which is system. This is a system web server. So to log into that, we simply click it and then log in with our credentials. The credentials here, the default credentials, are going to be admin and password, all lowercase. So as soon as we get logged in, we get a good overview of exactly how the device is doing. So we can see it's a Graphite G09. We can see that it has two interfaces. We get the IP addresses of those interfaces and tell that they're up. If we want to dig in a little deeper, we can take a look at the configuration section and see really these are all of the different sections that we had listed before in the device configuration section of Crimson 3.2 configurator. So if we wanted to make a change to the device configuration from the web UI, so the system web server we're logged into now, we would just click configuration and then system. We can come down and make whatever change we'd like to make here to the interfaces or really any other setting within the device configuration section. If we were to make a change and we want those changes to take effect, we'd have to click the Save Changes after we're done. We don't want to do that in this case, so we'll just click Revert. So next, let's take a look at the personality section. So if we move there, we can see there's the LAN IP personality that we created before with the IP address. If we wanted to change that IP address, if we had assigned that personality to a LAN interface, we could change the IP address of that LAN interface simply by changing the personality value here. Clicking OK, and then we need to click Save Changes, confirm, okay. Next, let's talk about the utility section. So the utility section is a great spot to go to upload and download configuration settings. And so you can make a backup of your configuration. It's going to come out as JSON, so you can actually make changes and then upload that later if you need to. You can also have access to a lot of new diagnostic features here, like the Crimson console. If we click on help here, we can see we have quite a few commands here that might help us understand how the device is doing. So we can do some pings from here. We can check the memory usage and a few other things. We also have access to do network captures now from your Crimson device. And so many times there's a network related issue and we want to figure out what's going on in the network. A Wireshark capture or a capture of the network is the best way to do that. So the network capture, you just select the interface, select what type of traffic you want to come across, and then click Start Capture. Once you're done with the capture, click Stop and go ahead and open it up in Wireshark or whatever other tool you'd like to use. I would recommend that you do a capture for at least 2 minutes so that you get all of the traffic. Many of the process control and automation traffic happens at some type of an interval. You want to make sure that you get all of the intervals within your traffic capture. So just make sure that your captures for a decent amount of time. Next, let's take a look at some of the other things you can have access to. So you can see, you can get network configuration, status, a good bit of information that was not available to you before that is now made available to you through the system web server. And if we click on the device information page, from here we can see a lot more information about how long this device has been up. We can force a reboot and factory reset right from here. Additionally, if you were to have issues with your device, you may end up having dumps that would be made available here on the right-hand side of your screen. You would simply share those with our tech support team. Thanks for taking the time to watch this how-to. We hope this content has been helpful, and as you can tell, we are very excited about the unified platform allowing native Crimson 3.0 and Crimson 3.1 devices to be upgraded to Crimson 3.2. Act today to download your copy of Crimson 3.2 on our website to get started.